Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Ken Jennings. Now, many of you know Ken. You've either read his bestsellers, Maphead and Because I Said So, or you've seen him on Jeopardy! He was one of the top winning finalists. So Ken's here today to share with us his new book, Planet Funny: How Comedy Took Over Culture. So let's welcome to the show, Ken.
Oh, thanks for having me, Marianne.
What a pleasure it is to have you here to talk about your new book, Planet Funny. It seems like it's getting such great reviews and everyone's loving it.
It's been very gratifying, actually. I have no background in comedy whatsoever, so it was kind of daunting to write a book about the comic sensibility and trends of today. There's really not a whole lot of jobs less funny than being a Jeopardy champion. So I thought this might be a hard sell for people. I'm glad people are actually engaging with the book and the ideas in it.
Well, I'd love for you to share with us about your background. For those that are new or listeners that are new to your story and how Jeopardy is a part of it, I think they will find this so amazingly fascinating and how all of this has come together in your life.
I was always a huge Jeopardy fan as a kid. We lived overseas. We lived in South Korea when I was a kid, and as a result, there was just one TV channel. It was whatever the U.S. Army put on for the military folks stationed there. And so me and all my friends had to watch the exact same shows at the exact same time every day. And so we all became Jeopardy fiends because that was what the Army put on every day at 4 p.m. when we got home from school. So I was obsessed with Jeopardy from a very young age, and it was a dream come true to just to try out for the show and then appear back in 2004, and then for some weird reason that I still can't believe today, to stay on for an increasingly bizarre 6 months on the show. It was a real pleasure. It had been my childhood dream to be on Jeopardy, and I still can't believe I won.
Well, what a great feat that is. I mean, my goodness, you must have like a photographic memory or something to be on as long as you were on that show. Says a lot about, your ability to retain information.
I think a lot of it is just curiosity. If there's a secret to that kind of memory, it's not any kind of, mental device or mechanism like your Sherlock or something. It's really just the brain will automatically remember stuff that people are interested in. So if you can somehow trick or hypnotize yourself to be interested in just about everything, you will find yourself remembering so much weird stuff.
Well, and is that kind of some of the curiosity that led you to write the book Planet Funny?
Yeah, I mean, one of the real joys about kind of being slightly famous now for being a bit of a know-it-all is I can pitch a book about whatever. I wrote a book about maps because I was a big geography nerd as a kid. And people were like, oh, yeah, sure, this guy knows a lot of stuff. He probably knows about maps. And now it's the same thing. Oh, this guy knows a lot of stuff. Maybe he knows about comedy. So the book is kind of a love letter to comedy, a history of humor throughout the ages. And then also a look ahead at what our society is going to be like in a world where jokes might be the most important thing now, where everything has to have jokes.
Well, I can say you did a great amount of research for each of the chapters. I mean, it's profound how much information is in this book. And so I think a lot of people, that's why so many people are just really enjoying it so much, because it's not just things that you've kind of come up with on your own. You really have done research to kind of back up what you're saying.
Sure. I mean, I was not an expert on the jokes of ancient Greece, for example, but I had to for the book. I did not know anything about the theory of ethnic jokes, like why people have told jokes poking fun at certain minority groups. There's a whole lot of scholarship on this, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know about the theory of comedy in advertising. For a long time, there was this conventional wisdom that said that ads should not be funny. Whatever you do, don't use humor. Right up until the 1960s, because the agencies were afraid that people would enjoy the campaign but not remember which product the joke was about. So I spent a lot of time with ad guys who now write these incredibly absurd, silly comedy skits that pass for ads these days, and had them walk me through why they work and what has changed.
Yeah, the whole dynamics behind that. Well, and so kind of starting with comedians here, is there anything that they really can't touch or can't do? And if so, why?
Well, we're living in a time where comedians and satirists are essentially our authorities. There's really not a Walter Cronkite type anymore. Like the closest thing we have now is a Jon Stewart or a Stephen Colbert. The guy at night who gives you your take on the news is probably a comedian who's doing written jokes about it. And he's got a viewpoint, or she's got a viewpoint, but the expectation is that you'll laugh first and foremost, and that anything you take away from it might be secondary to that. And that's great in some ways. That's a very persuasive way to learn information, to get somebody laughing about it. John Oliver educating people about crazy issues of public policy by, with silly jokes larded in. But there's some evidence that it's not altogether good. For example, when they test people who get their news from The Daily Show, they find that they're more cynical about politics, about the media, about the future, than people who watch hard news. And the implication might be that, in very rightly making fun of the silliness of our modern day, people like Jon Stewart really have convinced a generation of people that not to vote, not to care. It's all too ridiculous. There's no point in changing everything, which is not what they intended, but that seems to have been one of the effects.
Yeah. Okay, what's gone on there? Well, it was interesting when I read in your book and you talk about, I grew up watching Carol Burnett, and I just loved her. And I thought it was very funny how they had a sign in the office, and I think I have the quote here. It said something that there are a few good judges of comedy, and they don't agree. And it was just interesting on the take on that,
Yeah, the subjectivity of comedy is a very interesting topic, because we don't all laugh at the same things, right? We've all had the experience of hearing a joke and just for whatever reason thinking either that style of telling the joke didn't connect to me, or I don't think that's a subject that we should be laughing at, or I think maybe you, the joke teller, are laughing at that for the wrong reason and I don't agree with your viewpoint. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with humor because it's incredibly, incredibly fragile. You can't translate a joke into a different language often. Jokes from 50 years ago don't strike us as funny anymore. And so there's a lot of argument with comedians about what is it that makes for a good joke. And I think the answer is that it's always changing. The most important thing in comedy is novelty. It has to be, you have to feel like you're laughing at something for the first time. Nobody laughs at a joke the third or the fifth time they hear it. And so the style of joke telling has to change. We kind of have to feel like, oh, this is not the kind of thing that our parents or our grandparents laughed at. This is a new kind of joke. And as a result, today's jokes tend to be faster and more sophisticated and sillier than ever before.
Well, and do you think that comedy writers using the audience engagement and their laughter as a metric for what's funniest, is that something that's still relative, or is that kind of a thing of the past as well?
It's an interesting divide where comedians tend to think the audience's laughter is the ultimate judge. It doesn't matter how well you can defend the joke or how high quality or highbrow you thought the joke was. If it doesn't get a laugh, it cannot stay in the act. So comedians are slaves to the audience, whereas comedy writers tend to be the other way. They think, oh, the audience doesn't know. The audience will laugh at about anything, which is not untrue. A good comedian there's no shortage of jokes. A good comedian can make people laugh just by kind of bantering with the crowd, doing crowd work. So a comedy writer will say, I'm going to teach people what's funny, and eventually they will learn to laugh at my more advanced sensibility. And it seems like today the comedy writers may be winning, because jokes are getting stranger and stranger, and we've kind of just been hypnotized into thinking, well, I guess this is what comedy is now.
Now, is that the same thing, let's say, for comedy writers in regards to Saturday Night Live as opposed to stand-up comic?
Yeah. The famous quote from Tina Fey is that, let's see, how does this go? Most people will laugh when most people want to see an actor dressed as an old lady get pushed down a flight of stairs. They think that's funny. But a comedy writer wants to see an actual old lady actually pushed down a flight of stairs. The idea that comedy writers have this cruel and maybe kind of misanthropic idea of what's funny. And I think that's becoming more and more widespread in a world with so many jokes on our social media feeds and our streaming video services, more jokes everywhere that we know what to do with. I feel like we're all turning into comedy writers. The average person is kind of a comedy geek and a connoisseur now in a way that they wouldn't have been just a few decades ago, just kind of casually laughing at, Carol Burnett or whatever's on TV.
Yeah, whatever happens to be there. Well, so with all the research that you did with your book, Planet Funny, what were some of the things that surprised you the most?
It's surprising, I think, what things did not used to be funny. I mentioned advertising, pretty much not allowed to be funny until a very influential Volkswagen campaign of the 1960s. For hundreds of years, organized religion tended to be very, very down on comedy. Their point was typically that Jesus is never said to laugh anywhere in the Bible. And therefore, there's something a little suspect about it. Maybe we shouldn't either, because he didn't. We should maybe be sober and suffer this life so that we can be happy in the next one. And of course, today that's gone out the window. Religion has to be as funny as anybody else. You've got mega church pastors who are essentially stand-up comedians, and the marquee out in front of the church is no longer a Bible verse. It's some kind of funny one-liner like, come to my house after the game, God, or one of these things that gets passed around by pastors. So it was surprising to me that these things that used to be dead serious, airline safety videos, for crying out loud, now are elaborate comedy sketches with weird memes and in-jokes. And that was something I took deathly seriously as a kid, the idea that, what if something happened? Where's my life vest? And now it's an excuse for jokes.
Well, it is quite funny when you get on a plane and you've got the folks that are directing you as regards to flight safety, and they're cracking jokes and having fun with it as well. And, a few of them have actually said if the plane doesn't make it, you could just forget the life vest underneath your seat. So it's kind of try to push a little humor on something where you're like, that's not too good. But it's interesting how humor permeates everything, from people in their everyday work to what we see. And then you were talking also about ads, how we see it in our advertising.
Yeah, one thing I took away from the book is that it didn't have to be this way, our new funny world. This isn't just the creep of laughter into every crevice because it feels good and it's tempting to laugh at things. Really, this was kind of a conspiracy. A small group of powerful people and organizations realized how powerful humor was. And so ad agencies realized, hey, these people might buy the less successful product if the ad is funnier. And political campaigns realized, hey, these people might vote for the less qualified candidate if he has some funny zingers in the debate or if he's a goofy showman at his rallies. The CIA realized, hey, our reputation is kind of problematic, but what if we had a funny Twitter account where we kind of joshed with people about the secrecy of the CIA? And so that's the world we've landed in, where even the CIA is telling jokes on Twitter because they've realized it serves them. Comedy used to be our weapon against the establishment to make fun of powerful people, but now they've learned how to use it against us.
I just wonder who has that job there,
Right, who's tweeting for the CIA?
Yeah, who's the comedy writer for the CIA,
Every month they have a contest to see who's the funniest spy, and then he or she takes over the Twitter account, I guess. I don't know.
Then kind of take it from there. Well, and since you've written the book, Planet Funny, you probably have people coming up to you all the time with jokes, maybe family members and all that, friends.
Yeah, the old idea of the canned joke that you tell at parties. My dad always knew so many jokes, and that's a little out of it's not fashionable anymore. The idea that you would tell a little made-up one-act play to get people to laugh. Today we can all do this kind of jokey, bantery thing where we just quip and riff back and forth, and it's kind of the language of the internet, but we do it in conversation too. And it's the main way people relate to each other now, which is kind of scary to me. I don't want to lose other kinds of more sincere, earnest communication just because we're all so good at telling a joke.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and then, so how, I mean, and you talk about this in your book, Planet Funny, why don't you share with our audience a little bit about how this has also affected our politics?
Right. Well, this is the very unfunny part of the book. Politics was incredibly unfunny throughout American history. Even Lincoln, who was a funny guy, decided he would never tell a joke in a speech because he thought, he was living in serious times and the American public deserved a sober-minded president. So he kept that for, behind closed doors. And that all changed in the late 80s and early 90s when Bill Clinton rose to national reputation pretty much on the basis of doing what no other politician would do, going on Carson, going on Larry King, going on Phil Donahue, playing the saxophone with Arsenio's band. And at the time, everyone was like, this guy's a national politician. He wants to be president, and he's going on talk shows? Come on. That was thought very undignified. But he changed the playbook. As soon as he won, people realized this is the new reality. The, presidential candidates now have to be able to quip and banter with Leno and Letterman and their replacements. So we live in a world where the president has to tell jokes. And I really do think it's one of the appeals of Donald Trump to his followers is that they find him very funny. They went to his rallies and saw him kind of goofing around and showboating and doing his WrestleMania shtick. And they thought, yeah, this guy tells it how it is. He's not afraid to go there. It's the same kind of things you'd say about a brave, edgy comedian. That's what they thought of seeing Trump. And I think that's what helped put him over for a lot of people.
Yeah, made that transition. And then from also the comedy stage, we're looking at SNLs. I mean, they've got Alec Baldwin that's, playing President Trump. And, and they're having great fun with that as well.
Yeah, there's almost more people, it's not even almost, there's many more people telling jokes about the day's news than there actually is news, right? It's a weird dynamic where It makes it seem like the jokes are 100 times more important than the actual event because there's so many more of them. Something will happen, and I will immediately see 100 dumb jokes about it on Twitter and 20 hot takes about it. And, you just realize that people now see that this is the reason why things happen is to become fodder for jokes, and surely it should be the other way around.
Well, and kind of knowing what the root causes are for a lot of what we consider funny nowadays, how do you think as a society that will, either enlighten us or, just kind of give us reason to pause?
It's hard to predict what the future of it is. One thing that I've really noticed is that even though there's this vast abundance of jokes now coming at us from all directions, we don't really seem that happy. We don't seem to be enjoying them all that much. And that's a phenomenon that psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, that as you get more and more pleasurable stimuli, your brain starts to need them. That becomes your new baseline. We would feel now unhappy if we didn't have these hundreds of jokes every day, but we're not enjoying them all that much. People used to literally slap their knee and hold their sides when they laughed. And now we just type LOL, but we're not laughing out loud, really. At best, we're just kind of nodding and maybe giving a little narrow smile and saying, that's funny. So I worry that by having jokes everywhere, we've taken a lot of the fun out of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like an overload on what people will consider as funny as opposed to those moments that really stand out.
Yeah, think about how, we evolved to need a little bit of sugar, caloric content to get us through the winter. And as a result, we would live for that like one sweet treat because our bodies needed that. We needed that to stay alive. We evolved to need that little kick of sugar. But now that everything is full of high fructose corn syrup, that it's not just the dessert, but it's the whole meal, we're starting to see some of the unfortunate health effects of having everything be sweet instead of just the exception, the rare treat. And jokes used to be the rare treat. You'd have a hard day working in the field, and if somebody thought of something funny to say, you felt good for a second. And it was great to have that little respite, but now they're everywhere.
Well, and in your book, Planet Funny, you talk about how funny is kind of compared to a virus. And I wanted for you to kind of just share with us a little bit of why you put that in the book, why you feel that way.
I guess I just wanted to express that funny's not fatal. Humor won't kill you the way smallpox will, but it does infect parts of society. And once it does, you almost can't cure it. Once something is funny, all its competitors kind of have to be funny as well, or else they seem stodgy or old-fashioned by comparison. Once you've got Carson and Letterman on in late night, nobody's going to watch Nightline anymore because it's boring and dull by comparison. If one church has a funny little one-liner on its marquee, then all the other churches in the neighborhood have to do the same thing, or they look like the ones that are kind of out of touch and dull. So that's the main reason why once things become funny, they really never back down.
Yeah, I could see, and especially with making that kind of a comparison, when you look at that, you get these groups of people who don't want to be left behind. So like, ooh, I better liven this up a little bit.
It happens in advertising a lot. Once there's a funny ad, once every Super Bowl ad is funny, anybody that tries to do something different makes you go, wait, what was that? Like there was an insurance company a few years ago that tried to do a very serious ad about home safety, in which they talked about like an actual fatal accident that where a child died in the home, and it was supposed to be a heart-tugging moment. But people who had been watching silly ads for Mountain Dew and Hotels.com were not ready for a very serious public service announcement about a dead child, and it was incredibly unpopular, and the guy who approved it got fired because, we're no longer into that kind of serious messaging. We'd rather have a good joke.
Well, especially in commercials like that, you would have to consider what comes before and afterwards as far as placement, too, and if it's even fitting, and that makes sense why that person probably, that person was fired, so...
I talked to the guys who made the commercial that was supposed to come after that commercial. It was going to be Weight Watchers' first funny ad, and they were so excited to get this on during the Super Bowl, but it happened to follow that disastrous insurance ad. And so nobody listened to the Weight Watchers ad because at their Super Bowl parties, everybody was just saying, wait, what was that? Did that kid really die? Was that for real? And so the people who made the Weight Watchers ad were incredibly angry that they had lost their little moment.
It sounds like they did for sure. And it's interesting how these things take place when we look at placement and, what's funny today and just what probably was funny like 50 years ago. And I know you talk about this in your book, too, the cultural gap in humor. And why don't you share with us for a little bit what that means for our listeners and maybe like an example of that? There
are some jokes that don't go out of style. A guy falling down is probably always funny. The Marx Brothers are 80 years old, and somehow I still laugh at those movies. But those are the exception, not the rule. For the most part, humor has to feel new. You have to feel like you're laughing at something that nobody else is. So when I was a kid, I would stay up late to watch Letterman or Saturday Night Live, and part of the appeal was that Mom and Dad were not watching this, and they probably wouldn't get it. This felt very au courant. This is not the kind of thing they would laugh at. They would laugh at something old and stodgy. And copying my friend's Eddie Murphy records on cassette tape and listening to them over and over, I knew that I'd get in trouble for having those. But comedy is a really important part of youth culture in America. It kind of signifies, rebellion, and I'm doing my own thing, and I'm laughing at things that the grown-ups just don't understand, man. And so that novelty really pushes comedy ahead probably faster than any other art form, because you don't want to be the show doing the comedic stylings of 5 years ago. You got to be the show that's pushing it and doing something new, doing something a little faster, a little more sophisticated, a little more complicated, a little sillier. And I feel like it's really refined comedy almost as far as it will go. Today, it's possible to watch a 30-minute special on Adult Swim that is just, the whole joke is two guys redoing the credits to the old TV show Simon and Simon, shot for shot. And that's it. That's a 30-minute comedy special. Because we're laughing at just the meta comedy, the absurd non sequitur that this thing even exists. And yet, good luck to explaining to anyone over 40 why that's a joke. It's almost indefensible, yet that's what comedy is now.
Well, is that what the millennials are mostly attracted to nowadays as far as comedy is concerned?
Yeah, I think the idea is we all understand comedy so well just because there's there's so much of it, and we've seen all the permutations of it. We can kind of mimic it ourselves. We know all the mechanisms of it. That we want something we can't explain, something we almost can't understand. Like, that seems funnier to us because it's the kind of joke we know we couldn't come up with. And so that's kind of the purest thing that comedy writers want now, is that thing that just seems funny on first glance but cannot be explained at all. And it pushes comedy towards these weird non sequiturs.
And these weird endings. Well, and so, Ken, where can people, I mean, we can talk forever. I loved your book. I thought it was fabulous, and it was such a great resource. And it's just fun to know, it's fun and funny to know about Planet Funny. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
I'm on Twitter as @KenJennings, which is kind of the thing that broke my mind and made me more aware of how the internet is really only for joking now. My website is ken-jennings.com if you want to learn more about the book or read excerpts or reviews. Don't forget the hyphen, or you get to kenjennings.com, which belongs to the guy who would not sell me the book.
Well, we don't want to get there. We'll definitely go to ken-jennings.com. And, of course, your book is available on Amazon and all major retailers. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Ken. It's been such a joy to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Planet Funny, How Comedy Took Over Our Culture. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.